Hey all, so this is our 10th war of the season against 4 Loki. Now that may ring some bells. If any of y'all watch MP Blaze's channel, you'll have heard him talk about how one of his least favorite things about war is the prevalence of rematches in the upper echelons. And we are doing quite well for ourselves this season, as is 4 Loki, and we've rematched. We fought them exactly 5 wars ago, and here we are again. They are currently in top 3. We are in the top 10, but within range. And we didn't really want to face them again. And not because we were scared of them. I mean, they beat us last time. They're a very good alliance. It's never an easy war. But we did actually want to beat them. We just didn't particularly want to do it this season because we didn't think we had much of a shot at top 3, and we didn't really want to, prove ourselves at the expense of knocking friends out of the top 3, right? That's just not a great situation. But it's the one in which we found ourselves, and as long as I have been at SSx, we have lost to 4 Loki, usually fairly narrowly, every single time we've faced them. More than any other alliance, they have had our number. They usually have one of their best performances of the season against us, and we often have one of our worst performances against them. That's not strictly true this season because they've had an incredible run overall, and I'm not saying that they had their best one against us, but it was close. It was a tough defeat, and we are absolutely ready to take the fight to them. So let's head on in with my top 3 attackers this year, Pryde, Nimrod, and Tigra. So Sersi on this first node can definitely be a bit of a problem. Divine Barrier makes various methods of Nullify and even of Staggers less reliable. As she gains those buffs, she'll inflict a bunch of power drains, which locks off a lot of champions' utility because they have trouble actually having and throwing specials. But you'll see right here that Tigra's Neutralize does prevent the glancing buff, and we just want to stay really on top of this evade. And then as soon as we can get through that rotation once, throw our special 2, the fight's over. But it's the same basic theory on Sersi I've used a few times this season. Just flat out parry her at first, or if you have to, maybe intercept, but get Neutralize up, then bait the heavy, and just keep that up for the ruptures. So then we move on to the exact same fight I took last time. We faced 4 Loki, actually. Mad Cat's Kitty Pryde on 25 here. And the thing that's going to stick out about this fight versus that one, if you watch them back to back, I'm similarly boosted in both. But I have added 60 stones to my Nimrod in the interim. And what that does is adds another roughly 7.5% to Nimrod's Sig ability. But as I've talked about before, the compounding nature of his signature ability, the fact that it affects both potency and duration, means that when it comes to the Energize, the energy vulnerability, and the shock damage he inflicts with his specials, that 7% extra is actually more like a 13% extra total shock damage. Now that may not sound like a lot, but walk with me through this fight. So we start off parrying, because while we're in Blitz, that gives us 2 armor ups. It also gives her a prowess, which gives her another protocol charge. It also lets us knock her down, so that we can refresh those pre-fights from Mr. Fantastic. We throw the special 2, and the fight's over. And the thing is, if each of those shocks had been doing less damage, the inverse of 13% more, then there's a real chance that that might not have completely knocked her out, and maybe we would have needed to play around the unstoppable and the evade for a little bit before finishing the fight, and that can cause some problems. So I feel like the fact that Nimrod can just finish fights that much faster with even a small increase from his Sig ability really shows how much it's worth it and how much people are underselling it. And see, that was almost perfect. You saw that. That fight clearly would not have finished if he were doing that much less damage on every shock. But instead it finished with a special 2 without me using the special 1 first. No energy vulnerability at play. I really think that there's starting to be a narrative that because Nimrod is good enough to take up without his signature ability, that means his signature ability isn't that strong, and it absolutely is. So just remember that when you're talking about him. So next up we have this Dragon Man, which is a really good placement because he can put a debuff on you, the Ineptitude, when you block his special 1, which is sometimes how you'll deal with the power charge. If you don't hit him for long enough, because maybe you're baiting out a bunch of specials, you also get an armor break on you from the node, and you start with a heal block. That's the thing that's really easy to forget, is that there's already 1 debuff from the node. And so it's not difficult for Dragon Man to get to 3 debuffs on you and then be unblockable for the entire rest of the fight if you don't have some method of purification. So the plan here is to simply rely on Reed's pre-fights to make sure that the power gain isn't that bad. We don't need to be dancing for a long time baiting specials, and we don't need to block the special 1 to prevent him from immediately going to his special 2. And as long as we can do that, it doesn't matter if we get the armor break here, because we'll instantly get rid of it, and we're just making sure to parry him to remove the power charge. But also, now that we're ramped, when he has it, we're reversing it anyway, which is why he hasn't thrown a 3rd special 1 yet. He's only thrown 2 specials, which is fantastic for a fight against Dragon Man. We finish with the special 1, get all the charges we could possibly need back. Especially because I waited to take this until the other minis were down, and we only have this mini on Brute Force and the boss left. So I'm going to be taking both of these with Tigra. I personally think that Heimdall is a dream matchup for her. You can make the special 2 miss, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you have a bar of power, because the spacing on it is a little tricky. But if you push him to it, it's not a like, oh, you're going to get hit the way it is with other characters, and she can easily heavy after both his special 1 and his heavy, actually in the middle of his heavy. And so you can just get tons of ruptures up. It's really easy to keep neutralize. You will often bypass the true strike he gets on his special 1, and you're going to be gaining tons of power as well. So we head into the fight, and that's our basic plan. Bait the heavies, counter them. When he throws the special 1, counter that, build ruptures, throw a special 2, expect the fight to be over then. And if he doesn't play ball for a minute, we take some brute force damage, it doesn't matter, because we have class advantage, the damage from it is halved, I'll heal it back up. So see right here, this did surprise me, because Tigra's neutralize is a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes it prevents effects that would occur exactly as she applies it, and sometimes it only prevents effects that happen on the next hit. It doesn't apply to that exact hit. So some quick examples, and I'll pause it here. Black Panther Civil War and Super Skrull, she can prevent on-hit effects. Even if they would gain armor on the very first hit, she stops it. Against Cosmic Ghost Rider, Civil Warrior, and apparently, I found out today, it had not somehow come up in my duels yet, Heimdall, she doesn't prevent them on the first hit. Neutralize has to already be up when the armor up would proc for her to prevent it. It's more like with Thing. I've mentioned before when I've taken Thing with Tigra, hitting him at 14 rock stacks or less is always safe, but hitting him at exactly 15 is not, because the Unstoppable procs on that hit even as you're trying to apply neutralize and prevent future buffs. So that honestly just surprised me. There's not a whole lot you can do to avoid it. You can just try and keep neutralize up, especially as he's approaching 100 of his armor charges, because that's the only time that the armor is going to come up as you hit him. I'll pay a little bit more attention to it next time, but that's also why we used an invulnerability. Not the biggest deal in the world. So we head into this Colossus boss, and I've taken Colossus in a couple spots with Tigra recently, and also assigned against him multiple times, and the thing we keep saying is that he gains armor ups on immunities from the timer when he throws his special 2. And it's also important to note that a duped Colossus can gain an armor up at the end of the short 3-second armor from the timer as it becomes permanent. So watch for that. But there is one other potential source on this node. So you see, we lose our senses there. I'm not overly concerned about it. She's a mystic. This node has an absurd number of buffs. We'll get it back, and like worst case scenario, we basically just wait and get another special. But I think it's coming up here. Yes. So we parried him when Neutralize was not up, and he gained an armor up. Because I parried him knowing that the AI is generally a little bit more likely to throw a heavy after being parried. What I forgot is that if you parry someone on a stun immune node, that counts as trying to apply an effect they're immune to, and thus triggers Colossus's ability to gain another armor up and go unstoppable. So a bit of an issue there. We also threw a heavy as Neutralize was ending and the timer was coming back earlier and got hit for that. That one was entirely my mistake. There was no like planning issue there. It's just what I should have done in the moment is instead of throw the heavy, I think I had time to retaliate with a medium, but I should have declined to charge the heavy so that I could make that call later. Because that's the thing, is when you go to charge the heavy, you are locking yourself in. You can always, if there is time, just come in with a medium, apply the Neutralize that much faster that way, but you've left yourself the option. And that would have saved me the second time I got hit too. So there I knew the heavy would land, but again, I did have the option of just not going for it and waiting. This fight has enough factors. Colossus has enough buffs that put it back in your control if it ever starts to slip out. You don't need to be aggressive. And so while this was a solo and I had, enough health left, I think you can clearly see me shift into a more defensive, careful posture after the second time I get hit, because I dropped below 50%, and that turned on my, hey, if you get hit again and he full combos and crits, you die, light in my brain. So there was that character shift. But if I take this again, I think I'm going to try and make that a little bit sooner. Be sure to throw in more medium punishes instead of heavy punishes after his heavies and special ones, since both of those animations are fairly slow and allow Neutralize to fall off, especially since Kitty was not on the team. That's just what I'm going to keep in mind next time. Still a very safe fight, but I learned some things about how to make it safer earlier next time. So then for the war itself, like I said, 4Loki has always had our number, but not this time. I mean, it was, again, a tough, close war. Best I can tell, I think there were some deaths resulting from input issues on both sides. I know we had a few where you watched it back and it was just so obvious that it had to be an input issue, because the alternative was a veteran of multiple tier 1 seasons just not knowing where the block button was for about 4 combos in a row. Like, that doesn't happen, right? The issues have definitely felt worse to me this last week, and I know that came up for us, and seeing some of the deaths on the other side, I strongly suspect it did for them as well. Either way, hopefully those balanced out, and it was the rest of our deaths that decided the war between us, because we did edge them out by a few, and managed to win this rematch, which did not drop them out of third, which is nice, but has potentially put us into contention going into the end of the season, which was not something we expected. So these last 2 wars are going to be really interesting for them, for us, and for everyone else at the top. So watch out for those videos. Hope you guys found this one interesting. Hope maybe you learned something about Nimrod or Tigra or both. And I will catch y'all tomorrow with the next one. I am getting back on pace with these, I promise. So until then, thanks so much for watching, and take care.